it is important that as men and women, we do own our power and we do own the passion with which we're doing our work and service in the world. But what I began to see, what I was told by spirit and literally the people in front of me, is that the vision of what I wanted to create, the amount of impact, it wasn't on me alone. And this is actually a big piece of growing ourselves, of having the support in the world, and supporting people in turn, and the work that you do, Darla, is like helping people really step into their soul's purpose and their dharma.
It's Retreat and Grow Rich, the podcast. I'm Darla LeDoux, best-selling author, coach, and retreat leader, and I'm on a mission to normalize transformation on the planet, one intimate retreat at a time. This show's dedicated to the coaches, consultants, healers, leaders, and light workers who are here to hold space for the truth that transforms lives and get paid for it. Expert retreat and business tips, strategies, stories, and magic. It's your weekly mini retreat delivered right to your ears. Let's do this. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Retreat and Grow Rich, the podcast. I'm Darla LeDoux. I'll be your host and interviewer today. I'm so excited that we have Shasta Townsend with us. And I'm thrilled to bring you Shasta because she has a wealth of experience building seven-figure businesses, more than one seven-figure business, actually. The first as a yoga studio owner, founder. Were you an instructor also in the beginning?
Yes. Yeah,
so
in
instructor,
the beginning, yeah, for sure.
And then so I can't wait to share that part of your story because I know a lot of people who want to host retreats either are yoga teachers or that's a part of their training or their journey in some way. I think yoga is a gateway drug. It was for me. It definitely was the thing that opened me up to hearing messages from spirit in a whole new way. Way back when I was in my corporate job, I would even say it was part of the impetus for me leaving corporate. So I know we have a lot of yogis here who would love to hear your story of how you built that business. And in creating that business, Shasta has actually shifted her focus. She's still running that. And now she's working with really successful women entrepreneurs to go to the next level, to embody their deservingness, their willingness to receive, their willingness to talk about money, soul, spirit, and even sensuality and sexuality. So spirit has called her to a whole new level of conversation, which I believe is such an important conversation to have on the planet right now. And the way you merge those things together, Shasta, is just so inspiring. So I'm really excited to share. We met at an event, 6-8 months ago. And when you shared with me about what you were doing, and I looked at your business card and the energy of it and the way you communicated what you were up to in the world. And I was like, yes, I hope that I can bring you on and share your brilliance. So welcome, first of all, to today's conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Darla.
It's
it's wonderful. I'm super excited.
Awesome. I would love to start with a bit about your story. And I like to frame it up as, and I would really love, I know you're at your next evolution. And I think people would be super interested in your journey to start the yoga studio. And what was your calling that brought you there? And maybe a little bit about the story of what's guided you to these different evolutions.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you, I was actually in a corporate job. I was doing really, really successfully financially in my mid and late 20s. And I was miserable. I had the life on the outside that everybody wanted. I worked in PR for some of Canada's biggest companies. And my job was basically to like party and wine and dine people. And I was traveling all the time and overworking and had no idea how to manage my internal story, had no idea how to set boundaries, and just really felt like I was showing up in this way that was totally not authentic to myself. what happened, of course, like many of us, is we go through either a physical or emotional crisis. And I had both. I was creating massive back pain and major amounts of insomnia and anxiety. So, you know, you meet somebody and they are really an angel in disguise for you. Is I was having really, really bad back pain. I went to see a chiropractor, and the chiropractor actually said to me, there's nothing wrong with your back. It's all your mind and your spirit. And at that point in my life, you know, I was maybe like 26 or 27. I was like, I have no idea what he's talking about here. Even though I'd always been on a path of success and growth, I really wasn't in the self-development or spirituality realm. And he said to me, have you ever considered practicing yoga? And at the time I was like really into competitive boxing, actually. So the idea of doing yoga seemed really like wimpy to me. But there was something about it that day I said, okay, I'm going to try this. Like, I have nothing to lose. I'm literally breaking down. And I went to a yoga studio in the city, Toronto, that I lived in at the time. And I literally laid on the mat at the end of class and cried and cried and cried like I'd never cried before. And it was something that cracked me open. And I think, you know, for your listeners, if you've done any yoga or transformative practices, you have those moments where you're like, I don't know what the heck is going on, but something big is happening here. And I was one of those people that it was really, I invited that into my life, not even knowingly. And I signed up to do my yoga teacher training. Like a month later, I was hooked. I was like, give it to me every day kind of thing. I felt like a vastly different person. And what happened was, you know, this is why the power of these transformational practices of going on retreats, the very thing that you coach and talk about, Darla, is that having that experience of transformation gave me the courage, but also the awareness that I needed to make some changes in my life. At the time, I was engaged to be married. I was living in a super great location. I was making all this money. And I was like, wow, I don't actually want any of this. I'm not happy. I'm not living the life that I want. And really quickly, you know, it's like yoga blew up my life because I left my fiance. I gave notice at work, but I actually just thought I would go back to my corporate career. And that was in 2002, so quite a while ago. And things just started shifting. I was on really high levels of anti-anxiety medication. I started to come off of them. And I kind of did the whole eat, pray, love thing before Elizabeth Gilbert ever did. And like so many thousands of other women through the ages, is I went to India for the first time. And that experience, I mean, you know this, and everyone that's listening knows this, the transformative power of travel and the transformative power of retreat, because I literally spent 4 months in travel and retreat in the motherland of India. And when I came back to Canada at that point, I fully thought I was going to go back to my career. I fully thought that I was going to be living in Toronto again. But I didn't. I moved in with the man I'm now married to. We moved out of Toronto. And it was summer, and he said, you know, what do you want to do? Why don't you take the summer off? And I said, I really want to teach yoga. It's been massively transformative for me. And I kind of accidentally started a business, which is not how I would recommend or coach people on doing now, but I started teaching yoga. And before I knew it, I had a yoga studio. And it was like, you know, those times when you're just in your soul's purpose. And this is something I really teach my clients, is when you're in your soul's purpose, it's not that it's not work. There was work involved in all of this, but the level of ease and grace and success that came so fast was, there was literally like no way I would be returning to a soul sucking job. And so I had this business, and I started training people on how to be great yoga teachers, and it just multiplied from there. But, you know, I believe that a big part of why that happened so quickly is really 3 things. One, as I said, I was trusting spirit. I was kind of like, I have nothing to lose. I'm just going to keep taking the next step. I had no idea where it was going to lead. And that was really unlike my A-type personality at the time. But I just kept trusting the next step, trusting spirit. The second thing is I had such a high dedication to personal growth and to really bringing my clients, my students, the very best. So my classes were good. My business was good. My teachers were good. Yeah. And the third thing is I really looked at what is the impact that I want to leave in the world? You know, what's the legacy? What's the dent in the universe that I want to make? Because I got to tell you, I mean, you know this, I'm sure. There were days where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I felt like, oh, things could be easier to give this up, whatever it is. But I really stayed on track, and I stayed in terms of the larger purpose of things. And the other thing I did is I always had really good mentors. So that kind of got me to this place. And so what's happened is Balanced Life Yoga is the name of a beautiful studio and community. I mean, there's literally thousands of people that come.
Shasta, how did
and
you?
it's such a thrill.
You know, you said I accidentally started a business. How did that go in terms of the space? Because even, you know, a lot of people that I work with, they really want a space. They want their own space to invite people to. Did you just like lease a space? How did that come to be? I'm curious about that.
So I actually started really humbly. I started teaching in the local library, and my classes actually got so big that I couldn't handle the space. And I said jokingly, right, and this is laws of the universe, ask for what you want and expect it to come. I know that at the time. I said jokingly to a realtor that I knew, oh, if you find a space for me to rent, give me a call, ha ha. And he called me a week later and said, I have a great space for you. It's vacant. It has hardwood flooring. It was less money than what my budget was. It was really one of those things where, you know, I don't want to suggest to anybody that, you know, it's magical thinking that the fairies of the universe just land shit in our laps, because I was in action, but there was a perfect harmony to the way things unfolded. So the teaching, the truth is, if we want something, I mean, it's already there, but I lined up to it. And so literally, you know, I had to overcome my fear at the time of signing like a 3-year lease. But having that also made me say, like, this now is a real business. I need to really think about monetization and being of service and making sure I'm paying my rent. So it's actually quite easy to find a space. If those of you that are listening, you know, talk to a realtor, and even just go on Kijiji. There's tons of commercial spaces available that are totally, I would bet, within your budget.
That's awesome. Awesome. So trusting the next step. And actually, I have another question, something you mentioned. You said your classes were really good. And so, you know, they started to expand just naturally. And then you talked about training people how to be great yoga instructors. And that being something that you started to do, that you just kind of, I'm assuming, followed the energy and started training people. I train people how to be great retreat leaders. I'm really curious, what drew you to do that? And, you know, what did you notice about what it takes to be great?
Well, you know, and I say all of this with humility, but also I think it is important that as, you know, men and women, we do own our power, and we do own the passion with which we're doing our work and service in the world. But what I began to see, what I was told by spirit and literally the people in front of me, is that the vision of what I wanted to create, the amount of impact, it wasn't on me alone. And this is actually a big piece of growing ourselves, of having the support in the world, and supporting people in turn, you know, and the work that you do, Darla, is like helping people really step into their soul's purpose and their dharma. And to really see, I think it's the feminine model that we are all interconnected. And so how can I support these people who do have passion and drive and spirits moving through them, even though they don't really know what that looks like yet? And in turn, those people actually support me. You know, there's, out of that teacher training group is how I hire my teachers. It's a great source of revenue in my business. And it's also just, you know, fun. And I think that that's the thing that I've always thrived on. And I think that that's a big part of doing retreats, is I was always someone who I wanted to be like, what's the next step that I can give my students in their own transformation? And so retreats, teacher trainings, certifications, mentoring is the natural part, you know. So those of you that are listening, it's to also think about, you know, well, what is that next level of support that you can give your clients and students, because everybody benefits from that. And that was always really my approach of thinking, how can I be in service? How can I allow everybody to go to the next step who wants that. And, you know, to date, I've had over 1,000 people go through that training. And not all of them become yoga teachers, but they go through major personal transformation.
I love that you said, you know, what is the next step I can give them in their own transformation? And I find, you know, that approach is also very feminine, because a lot of times in the masculine model, people want to sit down. I see this all the time and have a whole plan, right? Like, this is exactly what I'm going to offer from now into infinity. I know I certainly had that as an engineer, right? Like, here's exactly what it's going to look like forever, as opposed to really listening to the students or the clients and asking the question, what is the next level in their transformation? And that's how my business has evolved. I love that you shared that, because it sounds like you didn't sit out with a grand plan of this is what I'm creating, but you really tuned in and honored what people were seeking, and that divine co-creation.
Yeah, it's exactly what happened, you know, but now I say, how did I grow to 7 figures annually? Is that I do the combination of both. You know, there's the constantly every year listening, evolving, providing new support and services, and then ensuring that I do have the structures, you know, the support, the systems in place. And it's, you know, it's awesome. It's this marriage really of the feminine and masculine. But I think that what comes with that is really being able to trust ourselves, you know, to trust that we can listen to people, that we can trust them, that we can trust the intuition and the guidance within ourselves, because the human mind wants the security of like, I got a plan and I'm sticking to the plan, versus that real intuitive internal guidance, which really is that powerful feminine.
Yeah. I talk about, you know, having the structure and then the freedom within the structure to create. So in other words, when it comes to retreats, you know, retreats are a part of your model. You know how often you're going to do them. You know how you're going to monetize them. And then the nature of the transformation that happens, that unfolds. It'll change over time. And as you deepen your work and grow in your thought leadership. I also love that you had the foresight to say, you know, the level of vision that I have and the level of impact I want to make, I can't make it alone. And I will admit, for me, that took me a long time to learn. Like, in theory, I was like, oh yeah, you know, abundance, partnerships, like collaboration. But in my heart, I felt like I have to do this on my own, right? And it's all about me. So I love that you saw that early on and used that to create. How has that been, or what have you seen about that with regard to other business owners you've seen be successful, the women you coach, that ability to embrace that this vision is more than just me?
I really, you know, I kind of go to the mat that support and calling in the right support and demanding, in fact, support is what's required in order for us to grow as individuals, but also to grow our vision and just to grow our finances. If you want to have more income, you have to have support in place. There's just no question. And I'll talk about how to do that in a second. The other aspect of it is also, as entrepreneurs or leaders or teachers, it's important that each of us is also being nourished ourselves. We're often, those of us in the service industry or helping industry or transformational industry, it's actually really easy for us to give, and we're super uncomfortable with receiving. And yet, you know, we preach to our students and clients that they need to receive and receive. And so really modeling that the best we can, I think, is so important. And it's also just staying sane. So there's no question that even in my business, you know, I've been in business for 2 decades, that I've had my moments of the do-it-yourselfer and the overly responsible one. But I really made a shift around that and calling in the right support. And not only is my business doing way better, those people are living their soul purpose. And as a woman, I feel just much more at ease. There is a lot of tension around being in business. I think a lot of the conversation about business is not helpful. especially for women. And we feel we have to lose our femininity. We have to lose time for ourselves. There's no question that business requires energy and effort and passion. But this idea of having it all, I think, is actually true and very essential and important, or why be in business. And so the big shift that I often help my clients with is to, one, really look at what are the thought patterns and belief that they've probably had since childhood. You know, one thing for me is I'm the overly responsible one, so I have to get shit done. And I also had trust issues, given betrayals and disappointments in my life. So healing all of those things really is the, you know, a big part of this. And it's not only that we get certain results, amazing results when we do that, but I feel like a different person. I feel more true to myself. I feel like a more magnetic woman, because I'm not carrying all this like mistrust and, you know, working 40 hours a day kind of thing. And it's also just juicy. You know, the second part of it is that I really believe that humans are wired for connection, and that it's lovely to have support in our life. It's essential, I believe. And when you attract and hire and retain the right support, whether it's team members or JV partners or even suppliers, I mean, this is the juiciness of business. This is the fun times of really having your collaborators there with you. And I mean, the third point is, it's absolutely true. Any income goal, and this is what I often coach my clients on, they come to me and they have, you know, really specific income goals that they want to drastically increase. And one of the fastest ways to do that is to actually replicate yourself. And not only replicate yourself, actually hire people or retain people in some way that have skills and masteries that you don't have. I mean, there's so many skills and masteries that I don't have, that I just engage somebody. And when I engage them, because I know the thought then is like, well, I don't have the money to do that. A big shift in thinking is they are in place to drive your success. And if they're not, then there's another conversation that needs to happen. But I think so often as entrepreneurs, we look at support or team as like a financial drain. Whereas as soon as I hired a sales manager, I mean, our sales increased by like 300%. I mean, that's crazy. So just by having her in place, you know, it's massive success. So, I mean, I could talk about that all day, but there's, you know, some thoughts for your listeners on that, but it's totally essential.
Amazing.
But it's a journey, you know, and be easy with yourselves too about that. It is a journey of shifting out of that kind of lone wolf, independent go-getter mindset into really the co-creator and collaborator, as you said.
Yes. I'm going to ask a bit about, you talked about humans are wired for connection. I agree. And I believe personally that some of the patterns since childhood that you mentioned, things, you know, they come in all varieties, you know, trust issues, being responsible, all of those things that you mentioned, keep us from connecting in general. And my belief is that retreats are the perfect opportunity to heal that. So as you were growing your yoga business, you decided to add in retreats. And I know you took women on a pilgrimage to India each year. Talk a little bit about your choice to incorporate retreats and what that journey was like for you.
Yeah, retreats were part of my model actually pretty quickly. One of the reasons was I just loved to travel, and I really had a passion for exposing people to different cultures and lands that they wouldn't necessarily go to, because travel never scared me. I've always been a lifelong sort of adventurer and traveler. So it felt like a natural thing to be like, I'm doing this thing, come with me. Of course, from a revenue perspective, retreats were very successful also in my business. But the third was that it's kind of like, I don't know, it's almost being like, pressure cooker's not quite the right word, but because you are in a retreat, you're away from your life, you're away from the day-to-day kind of personality of how you show up, and you are meeting like-minded people and doing this transformative practice. Things that happen on retreats are just, they're sensational. I mean, I really do believe that there's openings and ahas and relationships that happen on retreat that really I don't think there's an opportunity in day-to-day life that I see, or even in sort of like classes that I see in this world. I think what also was powerful for me as a retreat leader is retreats allowed me, as I said earlier, to take my teachings one step further, because on retreats you are with people, and I set them up in a way where it was, we're going to go deeper into these things. I also combined cultures and lands into the retreat themes as well. And they were also an opportunity, I mean, even for me as a retreat leader, to form deeper relationships with students or clients. And, you know, I actually think of myself as kind of an introvert. So it was lovely. It was lovely to share those experiences. There's people that I still in contact with, you know, 10 years later after a retreat. There's some of the highlights of my life. So there is no question that the transformation on both sides, you know, and I have people that say, oh my God, aren't retreats draining for you? And I say, no, I feel energized. I feel alive. I feel enriched by all of that. But it's definitely, you know, having tools like you teach people, systems in place, but I think just an awareness of the power of connection, you know, is how we started this conversation, the power that as the leader or the teacher, you get to connect with people at a deeper level. And that I think is really juicy, that we're not maintaining this sort of hierarchical relationship. You still want to be in leadership, but you know, you get to, I mean, one of our retreats, we went to Costa Rica and we went to this bar in the middle of the jungle, like, and it was just like fun, you know, and my old professional corporate self would have never let myself go to a bar with all my students, you know, and do tequila shots. But I was like, no, this is part of it too, is they need to see me as a human and having fun and joy and collaboration and having a good time. So that was always my approach with retreats personally, is that it needs to be fun for me too.
I love it. Yeah. I know you had mentioned when we spoke, you know, before this interview, that people have that idea that it's draining, and you do need boundaries in place so that you can replenish. And, you know, there's lots of things that people do or ways of being that people bring that create the drain, right? Like if you're being responsible for everything and trying to hold it all like tightly, that is draining. But, you know, if you're in your center as you're leading, it's super nourishing. And you mentioned a couple of things that I just really want people to get. So you said the transformation is on both sides. And I've found that to be true. Every time I lead, I grow. Every single time, like whatever the collective transformation is, because there is this, I teach, you know, the soul of the retreat is born, and then people know if they're called to it. And then the transformation happens for me first, hopefully at least a few days before leading it, right? But it happens over the time as I'm preparing for the retreat that the lessons get integrated for me, so I can hold space for that. So it's transformational for me every time. And you mentioned that they get to know you on a deeper level. And what is the best way for people to know whether to hire you, or if you're their person, is to get to know you on a deeper level? And I find in retreat, one of the things when you've done your work, like I talk about this a lot, when people are starting out marketing their business, they don't really know how, like what the message is that they need to talk about, right? So we're in our head trying to figure out, what is my messaging, and trying on all different elevator pitches and, you know, trying to say the right thing. And when you're in retreat, you just be you, and people get to see you, and they get to feel your energy, and they watch the way you handle situations. And when you're traveling, especially, I'm sure situations come up where, you know, people probably aren't even thinking about it, but at some level they're going, oh, if that had happened for me, I would have panicked, freaked out, and, you know, whatever. And they can watch the way you lead with grace or handle different situations and go, I want more of that. I want to be like that. And that's what people are really leaning in for. I want to hear a little bit more about some of your travels and adventures, and how, you know, you said India was a clear part of your personal journey. I've only done a handful of international retreats. So I want to bring your wisdom in terms of what you learned about that, or what was most exciting? What were some things you learned in retrospect that you did differently the next time?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I think my nature is I just dive into things. The very first retreat I ever did was to India. Actually, I've now done a few of them, but the first one was like, oh yeah, let's just take a pile of people to India. And I had been there, of course, a few times before I took people there. And since then, we've done Costa Rica, Bali, lots of local retreats, but some big international ones. I think that when I think about it, my teaching for those that are listening is to both be prepared but also flexible, and to also be in a place where things are going to unfold, especially internationally and especially in other cultures like Bali, India, any places where it's just a slightly different cultural approach. Even when we went to Guatemala, like they are just things don't run the same way. So as the retreat leader, like you were talking about, Darla, there is stuff that you're going to have to deal with. But the way that I approached it from a mindset perspective is it's nothing I can't handle. It's nothing I can't handle. And I think when people as leaders freak out is when they allow an idea of perfectionism to overwhelm their experience, because it's not going to be perfect. And I always pre-framed that with my students and clients saying, these are the lands we're traveling to. This is the bet. We're doing everything we can to make this super smooth, but we're going to deal with things that arise, and we need you to be flexible. I mean, and that's part of being a yogi and on the transformational path. Like shit happens, we have to deal with it. I mean, recently this year, we took a large group, 25 people, to India, and it wasn't like we were in one spot. We actually did this massive pilgrimage all over northern and northwestern India. I mean, now that I think about it, I was like, wow, that was quite a feat we did. And it all went pretty smooth because two reasons. And I will talk about something that came up and how I handled it so that people can, if it's helpful in any way. Two things we did ahead of time. One is, we are checking that everything is set up. And when we arrive, and I say we because my husband also supports me when I do retreats, is we're always double checking, is everything there? So nothing is, I arrive last minute and there's, a gong show. The second thing is I also, like I said, I pre-framed to my students that like, we're going to India. Okay. Like it's an amazing opportunity to be in the motherland, but also it's India. It's kind of a gong show. Like it's going to be dirty and busy and smelly, and you're going to see things that you don't see every day in suburban Canada. But that's the joy of it. Like use that as your growth opportunity rather than being in judgment about anything. And I think as retreat leaders, especially if we're going into international spaces and cultures that are very different than what we live in or our students live in, it's really important to position the cultural experience, the land itself, as part of the transformation, as part of the opportunity to grow, as part of the practice. There's no question that going to places like India is challenging because you see such levels of poverty and desperation and human suffering. And it's heartbreaking, but it's also then I did, a whole practice of like, how can we open our hearts and hold the place of love and truth and stability rather than getting crushed by the enormity of the poverty that you see, and also really see the blessings that we have as North Americans or Westerners. But it's also that, I'm kind of over perfectionism. Like even though I'm a super high driver, A-type personality, like things are going to happen, but I have done tons of training. I believe in myself. I have a mentor. And so I know that I have the skills to handle anything that comes up. Mm-hmm. So there's a point at the end of our travel in India where the hotel we arrive at, Darla, does not have enough hotel rooms for all of my students. And you're like, okay, now what? Like, what do you mean you don't have enough hotel rooms, right? And I can feel the tension. And of course, it's not like subtly spoken. It's like announced to the group, like, oh, you're kind of all screwed because we didn't book enough hotel rooms for you. So of course, my students go into like human survival mode of like, where am I going to be sleeping for the night, right? And what my husband and I did is I said, right, we're going to take everybody to the lounge, get them a drink, get them out of this energy. So that's a good thing to know, that when you're dealing with somebody and there's high energy, get your students out of that the best you can. And if it's a student, get them out so that they're not affecting the entire group with their, high negative energy. And I took them all, we went to like the lounge, we had a drink, we'd been traveling for like 10 hours on a bus, like it's all good, stay in that place. I had to find that center. And then we got the hotel owner, like we just wouldn't take no for an answer. And I'm a little bit like that we got the owner of the hotel on. And I said, you got to move some stuff around. And it was like literally magically these rooms appeared that originally the answer was no. So, I mean, my coaching or teaching to people on this call that are listening or the podcast that are listening is that be in that place of center the best you can, manage the group the best you can, because if your energy escalates, they're going to feed off of that. And as Darla said, they're looking at you constantly. They're looking at how you manage things. They're taking their cues from you. And then it's always, I just have a solution focus. It's the kind of mind I have. I'm always like, there's a solution to everything. We're going to figure it out. Even if some of us were at this hotel and some of us were at another hotel, it's not the end of the world. Like there's hotels in abundance in this town. So there's a solution. And because we held that, I think it's like literally the rooms manifested. And the third thing that we did also is I cut off any chatter about this in my students. So I had one student in particular that on that retreat was like just a tiny bit of an instigator. And, if you have one negative energy, it can really grow. So I just actually took her aside, and I'm not afraid of confrontation. And I said really lovingly, I just want you to be clear that it's not appropriate and I won't tolerate any, gossip or negative energy, because you can bring the whole thing down. And that's not what we're about here. We're really about supporting each other. So I literally need you to stop complaining about things. And I kind of held her to the place of like, can you agree to that? And it was interesting because she was like, oh, I actually am just a complainer all the time. And I didn't even really notice that. So she actually had a transformation and her energy completely shifted after that. And, it's important then that I am reaffirming that she's welcome and that all is well. So anyways, hopefully those are some helpful tips from.
Yeah, it's really common, even if you do a lot of screening, and I'm assuming you had a process to screen people who were going to get that kind of level of experience with you. And we still don't know, you can't predict the energy someone will be in or what, trigger from the past is going to come up that has them behave in a way that's maybe different than they presented themselves in the interview. So those things happen. So what I hear is, don't be afraid to speak your truth to people and also to actively manage the energy. I think for me early on, I would know, because this is how I'm designed. I see truth, and I feel energy, and like I can sense what's going on with someone, even if it's not being said. And there's a way in which we're kind of trained that, well, it's not appropriate to like, unless there's evidence, like in my corporate job, right? I was trained, like you have to write down the evidence of the things that someone is doing. So then you can have it documented and let them know like A, B, and C behaviors. This is what happened. When you're in retreat, you don't have time for that. You have to trust your instincts and you have to speak really truthfully with people. And it took me a bit of time to get good at that. How did you, it sounds like you're a head-on kind of person innately. But did you ever have any thought like, ooh, will they like me? What if I'm wrong about this person?
I think it's so interesting because we look at people who we perceive as successful in some way and we think, oh, they totally have their shit together. But it is, for me, even still an internal dialogue of like, I'm not here to be liked. These people, I want to have a good relationship with them, but I'm actually here to serve them and to lead. And I'm actually, one of the things I always think about is like, what's the greater good? What's the greater good for this person? What's the greater good for the group? and what's the greater good for me. And that has then helped me get that clarity of just literally asking that question, because sometimes we as leaders are triggered by people. They're showing up in a way and it's triggering our stuff. And so then we get into that place of confusion of like, is it me or is it them? You know, do I need to speak to something or am I having a reaction? So part of my reflection was always, you know, what's really true here and what's the greater good? Am I just having a personal reaction to somebody, or are they actually acting in some way that could be detrimental? I think the other thing that I've always done too is to just really go to that place of everything I do is out of love. And so that has helped me, I think, cultivate a level of self-trust, that I can trust my judgments and I can trust when I speak to somebody that is coming from a place of love. You know, I had a student on another retreat in Guatemala. It was quite an interesting experience. She thought she was the teacher. So every time I would teach or present, she would actually interrupt me and have to add her 5 cents or 10 cents or 2 hours.
Yes,
worth.
I've had that.
This is really interesting, you know, like, wow, what's going on here? I'm observing this and I'm taking it in and I'm thinking, okay, I get this. I get that this person, that's the role she's often in. And so I thought, if I let this keep going, it's me not being in leadership to my people, because people are looking at me like, why is she still talking and why is she interrupting? You know, this is kind of like day 2 of a 7-day retreat. And so I sat with it and I thought, what's the right thing to do? And I then went up to her and approached her and I just said, you know, this is what I'm seeing. So I made it evidence-based. And you know, why are you here? What's your intention? And is there a solution that we can find about it? And the interesting thing was, again, it was a conversation where she said, oh, I've actually had feedback about that. I find it really hard to be in a receptive mode. I'm used to being a leader or a teacher. And I'm really going to work on that. Thank you so much for speaking to me about it. So again, I think for me, it was, what's the greater good? How can I speak with love here to this person so that it's not about you're pissing me off or you're, you know, demeaning me or devaluing me. It's really that I'm in a role, a sacred role right now. And your sacred role is to receive and transform, you know, and to be the student and to give yourself the space to do that. So things come up, but you know, everybody listening has the skills to deal with this. There's no question. And I think it is, again, you know, greater good, what's the greater good here? And getting rid of, as you said, Darla, you know, like my role here isn't to be liked. Of course it is, but it's not really to be their best friend. It's to help them go through transformation, and transformation sometimes is warm hugs and sometimes it's actually clear words, you know. So we as leaders, whatever transformational leader we're in, that's part of our job and our journey. And I get that there's an edge around that, but if that is an edge for those of you listening, you know, it's like, get the help to do that because it's essential. And the interesting thing that happens is the feedback that I get from people is like, they feel they can trust me because they know that I will hold a boundary. They know that I can keep things safe for them. And that's really important, actually, because we are in a big relationship of trust, especially in international retreats where people are going to places they would never go to. They need to know that you're going to have their back. And we demonstrate that, you know, by taking the lead. Oh, it's fun.
That is, like, everybody listening, write that down. It's so key. People are watching the boundaries you model, and that lets them know that they'll be safe. And it also lets them know that you will hold them to the highest version of themselves, right? And a lot of times, I hear this a lot where people are being really nice in the sales conversation about whether to come to the retreat. You know, they're just being really nice and friendly and accommodating, and oh, you need some more time to think about that. Oh, you know, whatever it is. And they're not even holding a boundary in that conversation in terms of seeing that person's possibility. So then the person doesn't realize, like, hey, if I go on this journey, it's going to change my life. Because, you know, you've got to model that even before the retreat starts. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that part because you have had sold out retreats, wait lists for your work. And I'd love to talk a little bit about your insights on filling your retreats and also on pricing. And maybe has your pricing evolved? I know money and wealth for women is really important to you. So how did you price your retreats? How has that grown? What have you learned about the energy exchange of money in doing this?
It's interesting because when I first started doing retreats, and as I said, I was doing actually international retreats right off the bat, is we were staying at often like 3 or 4 stars. So we never were doing like budget stuff. That was never my deal. And I never wanted to be the budget teacher. That wasn't my vibe. I wanted people to really understand the level of investment and transformation. So that was really as offering an experience for people that I wanted them to have a nice experience, that we didn't stay in, hovels. We stayed in nice places. And I also always made sure that it was financially successful. So for me, I had a minimum every time I did a retreat that I or my business needed to profit. And then from that, I will go to, say, retreat centers or hotels or booking agencies and say, here's the line I need to be at, and what can we actually sell at? So that's a model that always worked for me. Really, and then around the sort of like money question was, and I'm not saying that I haven't done my own journey around holding my value and pricing stuff and money stuff, but again, it comes back to really seeing that this isn't an all-inclusive to Las Vegas. Nothing wrong with that, but that this is a transformational experience. And that's always how I thought about it and how I positioned it. And then I would look at what are the outcomes people are going to get on this transformational experience and what that's really worth. And what they're paying is actually a tiny, tiny fraction of that. And as I said, it was always also profit focused and like not opulence, but like a nice experience for everybody.
Was it challenging for you when you when many yoga retreats in that community are shared rooms, communal bathrooms a lot of time, like those are some of the things that I am unwilling to do. Was it scary for you to have a more premium experience?
It wasn't scary, but here's what I did is, again, it was really seeing and positioning myself in my retreats that this is not the bargain basement stuff. And if you want bargain basement stuff, like you can go on a yoga retreat for like $700. I mean, I don't even know what you get out of that. And those are not necessarily my ideal clients. Those are not people that are willing to invest in their own transformation. So they won't actually show up with a sense of dedication and openness and collaboration and transformation. They're just there for the cheapest stuff they can get. And those aren't the kind of students that I wanted. So I was pretty clear, and I remain clear on who is it that I really am here to support and help. Are there moments when we look at pricing things and I look at, is there an edge around this? Yes. But the one thing that I never did, and I got business coaching really early on in my business and can have continued, is the coaching that I got is do not look around and compare yourself to other people, because there's going to be somebody doing it cheaper than you. And there's also going to be someone doing it more expensive than you. And it's kind of human nature to look around and compare. Whereas for me, it was more like I said, here's a profit that I want to be at. Here's a service that I'm delivering. Here's the level of experience I want them to have. And then what's a price point that's meaningful? And then as a business person, and I know you teach people to do this as well, is then it's just really communicating the value of what people are getting. I mean, the retreat I just did to India, the price point was started at $5,500. And went up from there. But if they did that on their own, it would have cost them $10,000. And truthfully, they saw things with me because I had access to sacred sites that the average tourist doesn't get. So when someone's looking at the pricing and they might have like, holy crap, it's $5,500, maybe not. I mean, lots of my people were like, I'm on board, that's no problem. I'm giving them a value exchange. I'm saying we're staying in 5-star hotels. It would cost you $10,000 to $12,000 to do this on your own. And I'm giving you access to things you would never get to. So I think as, you know, retreat leaders and transformational people, we have to hold the value. We have to communicate the value and also know those people are there. And it was interesting because this past retreat that we took people to India, it was the highest price point that I've ever offered retreats at. It sold out, I think, in a month at 25 people, and I had a wait list, and it was like, whoa, like it literally was the highest price point ever, and we couldn't keep people away. So there is something interesting about that too. So, you know, we're looking at pricing, and my value's there. I mean, I have no lack of integrity. I know, like, they're getting a smoking awesome experience and deals. So that's kind of how I work with pricing. And it's, awesome. You know, it's also this clearing up of the money energy in general that, you know, you and I have talked about, and that I'm really passionate about too, is that we have this view in the transformational world or spiritual world or yoga world that, like, we're evil or greedy or not spiritual if we're financially successful. And yet all of the spiritual traditions talk about and have an actual divinity that represents abundance and wealth and money. And so it's actually behooves us, I believe, like it's actually your sacred duty to clear up our money stuff and to actually stop believing the lies about money and spirituality. Money is just a tool of source energy. When you're adding value to the world, money flows to you with ease. So I think that's really the standpoint that I've always kind of been in that, but really in the last couple of years, I'm like, I am so done with feeling guilty about my success or shame about things. I'm in perfect integrity with what I'm offering. So really clearing up the money stuff is essential for success.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about how you help people do that, because that's a piece of your work with clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the world of yoga, you know, I've been teaching people to become yoga teachers for a long time. And in the last year, Spirit really said to me, you need to actually really help yoga teachers and wellness-based solopreneurs, spirit-driven entrepreneurs actually understand what they're really here to do at the deepest level of sacred service and how to monetize that easily and how to overcome the very things that I was talking about. Most spiritual communities are actually preaching money limitations. They're not actually empowering people in money limitations. So I coach people. I have a program called the Yogapreneur Blueprint that is really about learning what is our deepest soul service, how do we monetize that easily and allow ourselves to be that sacred vessel of source energy. And, you know, the things happening for my clients are just, it makes me want to cry, because people that are going from stuckness and struggle and even thinking about giving up their soul's path because it's so hard, is in that program, I help them totally overcome that. There's so many, as I said, you know, lies in our culture about money and success, that it's hard and we're not allowed to be successful. And it's like, I'm just kind of done, you know? So that's part of, you know, my big passion. You can hear it in my voice. I'm really clear that that's the huge opportunity for all of us, that we're born for success.
Yeah. You said I got like this full body reaction when you said people are really thinking about giving up on their soul's path because of this money stuff. Because, you know, well, I'll let you speak to that. For me, when I left corporate and started my business, I set a goal of making $36,000 a year, and I reduced my life to accommodate that budget, because that was what I could imagine that I could make. Like, I did a bunch of math. I'm an engineer, so I got out my spreadsheet and I was like, okay, this is the minimum I can live on and not have to sit in a cubicle and be able to do this work that feels so important to me. And I was fully bought in to the societal belief that this type of work has less value than, you know, my engineering degree. I totally arranged my life around that belief. And then, of course, I met our mutual mentor who really helped me see that that didn't have to be true. And I also held my first retreat where I booked $36,000 in business in a weekend and went, whoa, isn't that interesting? The exact amount. And so,
wow.
You know, obviously my mindset has continued to grow since then, but I was bought into that belief. and in particular that some of these skills I talk about when I was in corporate, I got a review where my feedback was, your soft skills are great, Darla, but you might want to tone them down here because they'll only get you so far. There were like two tracks. You were either on the people side of things, which meant your career would be limited, or you were on the techie side of things, which meant you had more potential to grow. And today I'm so passionate about changing that around where we don't have to make that choice, where people aren't checking their humanity at the door because it's less valuable than, the speed of technology. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more for you about what's been something that shifted for you to really own your wealth and own that success publicly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting, and my backstory is that, just really quickly, I grew up in an extremely poverty-stricken life and full of abuse and racism and all kinds of craziness. So it was interesting because part of that experience made me want more, but I also held a lot of judgment and shame about the success that I had created in my life. And I was kind of hiding, to be honest. I was kind of hiding it. This year I bought a Mercedes and I was like, oh, no one can know that I'm driving my dream car. And it was like, what is that about? Like, that's a weird thing, Shasta. You need to really look at that. And the shift for me was, I have done a lot of work, especially in the past couple of years, around looking at the stories that I inherited from my family, from my schooling, from my culture, from being a woman in business, spirituality, my yoga culture even, about success, and that there was literally shame that I had about it. And I made a shift, and here's the shift. The shift was, I'm really dedicated to being a model of possibility, a model of what humans can do. I'm not special. I mean, if you were going to bet on somebody to become, a multimillionaire, it wouldn't have been me in high school. And so what did I do? I'm not a special person. It's like, I did the shifts, I did the work, I set up the business to do that. I continue to do that. I grow myself, I grow my team. And if I can do that, other people can do that. And so I saw that my sacred service was actually to, one, model that the best I can, and two, to support people in doing that. But this sort of human cultural story we have around mediocrity and suffering, not only is it false, it's just like, I'm done with it. I'm done buying into it. I'm done feeling worried or ashamed about judgment. And an interesting thing happened, and it's what you were talking about, Darla, is that when I made that shift, the results in my life showed up differently. And one of my teachers always said to me, when you make an internal shift and you see the results of it in your external life, you're going to make damn sure you keep doing that internal shift. And what happened was, as soon as I kind of claimed, like, oh, I have some tools and techniques, and I have figured this out, and I have systems to help you create this level of success, and I wasn't hiding that in my life anymore, the people came. And what they actually said to me was the opposite of what I was expecting. I was expecting, like, entitlement or must be nice or judgment. And what I got instead was, like, appreciation and gratitude and a desire to be a part of that. And so it was interesting because a big part, I think, of this path is we fear success. We fear the judgment around success. We fear people are going to take from us, or whatever the story is we have in our head. And when you shift that, in my experience and clients that I've worked with, because now I also, as you mentioned earlier, I work with women who are entrepreneurs and usually have, 6 figures and they want to go to 7 or 8. Is the big thing is the shift that we have about being successful and wealthy, and allowing ourselves as women or as individuals to receive our innate nature. I mean, the divine wants us to be successful. And so when we actually model that, even in the...
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The question that's coming up for me, that I hope it's okay that I ask this, I'm going to just ask. Because you have this connection to India, and you talked about the poverty there, and really, being able to open your heart and be present to the poverty around you. And how do you, because I'm sure you get this question, and I've heard many people ask this question, like, how do you reconcile that? This idea that we're actually a model for possibility by expanding the ability to receive and be in abundance. And then there's poverty in the world. And a lot of people, I think, feel guilty or feel like if I don't, I can't receive that because other people are suffering. How do you talk about that or think about that?
Well, there's two things. One is anytime that we go into that model or that mode of guilt or savior or evangelizing, it really is the ego speaking. It's this idea that I can rescue other people, that I can save other people, and let's be clear, like all of us get a little juice around being the savior. And that's certainly an archetype that I've worked with too. And we can actually save anybody. And in the transformational path, many of us are drawn to this path because we do have the savior archetype. We want to help people. Yeah. But the way that we help people is actually to do our own individual personal transformation and model that in the world. The second aspect to that is I firmly believe that every human has access to the divine, and every human has access to source energy. And we might say, well, there's people that are in poverty that have no way out of it. And yet I disagree. I grew up in extreme poverty and extreme physical and emotional abuse. And not that I'm the poster child for any of this, but there is a personal decision that every human needs to make that they want to grow and change. And that personal decision is something that we need to make as individuals. And this sort of evangelizing judgment about people who are in maybe states of what we, our poverty is, it's not our job to rescue those people. But here's the difference, and you're all gonna like this, is the change happens because we make shifts in consciousness. And so right now, the very conversation that we're having is shifting consciousness. When each one of us claim our birthright of success and well-being and transformation, that changes the whole human consciousness. Right now, you really need to look around our world and our culture. And again, this belief of struggle and mediocrity and win-lose, and it's total BS. It's not the nature of things. So I just refuse to buy into it. I refuse to believe it. And I refuse to have guilt around it, because the guilt will only block me from being in service. Everything I do in my life, it's not for the money, it's for the service, it's for the person that I become. But the money comes because I'm in service and I've become that, goddess energy the best that I can. So
that's
hopefully
beautiful.
That's helpful.
I know that's so helpful for so many people. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love it. So I would love to let people know how they can get more of you. I'm sure people are falling in love with you as we speak. So you've got two ways you work with people primarily right now: the Yogapreneur Blueprint, which you mentioned, working with yoga instructors to really create wealth and create a sustainable business. And then the Feminine Founder Formula, which is that working with the women who are six figures who want to go to 7 or more. And so people can find out, because, people may be listening to this at any time. They can find out more about what you're offering and get in contact with your team at shastatownsend.com/apply. Is there anything you want to add for people about what to expect there?
If you go to shastatownsend.com, there's a ton of resources around all the things that we've been talking about today. There's tons of downloadable stuff. There's YouTube videos. So if you just kind of need like a hit of some instant information or shift, it's there for you, and I'm so grateful to be here today, Darla. Thank you.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah. And if they want to go the step further, they know you're their person and they want to apply for one of your programs, just had that /apply, and Shasta will connect with you. Amazing. So any parting words of wisdom? Or maybe not wisdom, whatever you feel.
I just feel like the energy of what you're holding, Darla, and your mission in the world and what you're helping people step into is so needed and so juicy right now. And I just want to honor that in you and really honor the work that you're doing. And everybody that's listening or watching this, that you too have, you know, sacred, beautiful service to offer the world. And you're here with all of that support, and there's no mistakes that you're listening to this and hearing this now. So take that next step on whatever it is that you need to allow that source energy to flow through you. Because, you know, people like Darla and I, we were in that place of confusion and wondering, and totally. We just kept going. You know, we just kept taking the next steps, getting the help, getting the mentoring, taking the programs, and the rewards are beyond what you can imagine at every level of human experience. So glad you're all here.
Yes, I love what you said. You know, we're not special. I grew up in a town of 500. We were on food stamps. You know, it's a decision. And yeah, I love that. Wherever you are, people, just the next step and the next step, and continue to bet on yourself. That's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate your time and energy. And I hope we connect you with some right people who are ready for the next step with you as well. Thank you, Shasta.
Thank you, Darla. Thanks everyone for listening. Much love.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Retreat and Grow Rich, the podcast. If so, please share your experience and spread the word. Also, please subscribe over on iTunes and leave us a fabulous review. It makes a big difference in helping to get the word out. And you can join me in my mission to normalize transformation on the planet, one intimate retreat at a time. You can find show notes from this and all of our episodes over at alignedentrepreneurs.com/podcast. If you'd like to understand the inner workings of my retreat-based business model and build your confidence in your retreat dreams, you can grab my book, Retreat and Grow Rich, over on Amazon. It's the entrepreneur's guide to powerful, profitable retreats. If you're just beginning to explore incorporating small retreats into your business model, or you've been hosting retreats for years, but they're just not as lucrative as you'd like them to be, hop on over to retreatrevenueroadmap.com. Here you'll find a fabulous free gift. It's an extensive ebook that walks you through the 3 core types of retreats and how to use them in your business model to make great money and make a big impact. In each of these retreats, I'll let you know where to host them, what to include, where they fit in your business model, and the ever mysterious what do you charge. You can find that at retreatrevenueroadmap.com.